Well, I crept out the house last night, got myself in a taxi and went to the cinema and watched Dune Part 2. And as long-term viewers will know, I'm a bit of a fan of Dune. So it's a matter of, there was nothing, basically, spoilers. You don't really have to worry about spoilers, do you? Because if you don't know the story of Dune, it's like, what planet have you lived on? So, in view of the fact that it's like the biggest selling science fiction novel of all time, and there's already been a movie and a TV series made of the same story, I'm not so bothered about spoilers. If you don't know, you don't know. It's like, it's a strange one going watching a movie where you sat there. I'm actually going there because I'm like, is this film going to broadcast what Frank Herbert's core message from his books was? And it's like, when I watched the first one, when the end of the first movie is the fight, where we get to meet where Paul gets to meet the Fremen and we get to meet the Fremen. I can't find the videos now on my channel, but I made some Dune videos a bit back. It might have been when I got pissed off and had a purge where I've got rid of them. But it's like, I understand the Fremen quite well. I have my sort of own sort of angle as to how the Fremen work. And I do recall before that Dune 1 come out, I'm like, if the fight scene that's not in the David Lynch version, which is probably the most important scene in the story, if it's in there, you're in for a treat. And it was. They made it it was the finale of the film, was when it was a matter of what use to us are you? You're just water, you're just dead weight. And it's like the Fremen see people as just water. Oh, cool. Water. You just currency. They'll kill you and take your water, and it's like, well, he's not one of us, is he? Or they'll make a distinction as to, well, you're a good lad, but how long are you going to last in the desert? You slow us down, you'll be a liability. You use too much water. You waste too much water. You're a liability to us. All you're worth to us is water. So in some regards, the Fremen are cannibals and see human beings as food. And have got generally quite a miserable disposition to outsiders. But when Paul Atreides is questioned by one of the Fedaykin, one of the better warriors, one of their elite, and fights him, and he's like, he doesn't want to kill him. He doesn't want to kill the guy, but he has to. It's the rules. You have to kill him. And he's trying not to. And the Fremen are like, kill him. What are you doing? You're trying to humiliate him. Are you toying with him? Kill him. You dishonour him by going easy on him. Why are you going easy on him? Kill him. And he was like their brother, he was their friend, but that's the way they operate. Oh, the Fremen are legendary. It's like, yeah, you show yourself a good killer. And they're like, hey, this guy will do for us. He's a great killer. It's what impresses them the most. So it's like, the sequel starts just where the first film stopped, obviously, because it's a part 2. So it's like, it's made, you can watch part 1 and part 2 together and it'd just be one great big film. So they've done that and you can appreciate that, but they've altered a character, right? They've altered Chani quite a lot from the book. And Chani is like the voice of the director, because I think the director understands Dune in the same way as I understand it. Whereas my analysis of Dune is that it's a story of basically the Messiah myth. I've talked about the Messiah myth in the past, and it's something as to where it's like a trick. It's like, if you can convince people that there is such a thing as a coming Messiah, they will wait forever and not do anything but wait. And while you're waiting, you could be making yourself busy. Now, this is my opinion of Messiah myths. And that was Chani's opinion of Messiah myths as well. It's like, this is how they enslave us. And it really makes the case. It makes the case well. It kind of tells a version of Dune that Villeneuve, the director, is like me. He's probably the same age as me, roughly, isn't he? He's likely carried that story around with him for years and been thinking about it for years. And it's like, in some regards, his rewrite is like the voice of the reader who's read it before. Because part of Dune to me is that, don't do it, Paul. Don't do it. Don't do it. And I'm like, I even said when they made that Dune Part 1, it's like, they shouldn't make Dune Part 2. They should just make Dune Part 1 and just scrap it. I'm like, why, John? It's like, because then he won't do it. He won't he won't play the part of the Messiah. And he won't start the Holy War. And then he won't end up killing billions of people. It's a terrible tragedy. The story is the story of a holy war that gets out of control, that the leader of it, once he's unleashed it, can no longer control it. And it's like, be careful what you wish for. You pray to your gods. The Messiah will come and lead us to freedom. And then suddenly he turns up. And suddenly he does. And then suddenly you get, 10 years of just constant bloodletting and billions dead. So it's concentrated. The new one's actually concentrated around that. It tells the story correctly. Whereas Frank Herbert didn't tell the story like that. It's like Dune as a book they say it's a funny book to read because it's got no centre point to it. It's eclectic. You're hearing people's thoughts at the same time as in some sections you're an observer being told the story by a storyteller. In other parts it's like POV. It flips. It switches between these styles all the time. So it's like it can be a confusing read or a kind of weird read because it doesn't tell a story from a single point. So yeah, I watched the film last night and it's like there was nothing in it that disappointed me. Although when you get to it, there's just no surprises in it. There was kind of a surprise at the end, but I think they left it open to a sequel as to where at the end, quite an important element of the original story about the wives and the concubines of great men. It's like history won't remember the wives, they'll remember the concubines who bared the children. In Dune Part 2, Paul and Chani do not have any children, which is a big one because Paul has children. He has like Leto Jr., who's murdered by the Harkonnens. I say Harkonnen like in the Lynch movie and not Harkonnen like in the new one. And it's like, I like Harkonnen better. It's easier to say than Harkonnen. So I've always known them as Harkonnens. So it's like the big reveal that Paul is the grandson of Vladimir Harkonnen. Plays a big part in the film when it didn't do so much in the book. That wasn't actually, I don't think it was revealed in the book. My memory might be shady, but it was certainly revealed in the prequels who Jessica's father was and who Jessica's mother was. Jessica's mother was that Reverend Mother Helen Boheim, and her father was Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. So it's like the red hair they cast the actor with being a massive giveaway because they made all the Harkonnens ginger in the David Lynch film. So it was there, but it wasn't mentioned. But I'm pretty sure it was the prequels where they introduced that the Kwisatz Haderach bloodline was a mixture of Harkonnen and Atreides. The two deadliest enemies in the world had to come together to create the one. What's special about him? Well, he can see the past all the way to the beginning. and then that gives them the ability to see the future. So it's like, if you understand history well enough, you can see the path forward. So then you've got this guy who's like, I can see the future, but I can see all these possible futures. And in most of these possible futures, we fail and we die. But I think I know a way. I think I know a way. And the way be what happens. There's very little very little in it that's supernatural, which is good. There's very little in it that's whimsy or fanciful. It's like the Kwisatz Haderach be, well, a combination of all that is good and evil. Two sides that come together as one. And it'd be a matter of, in that film actually, they say it's quite well written as to how they've made it, give it some brevity. And it's like, what did the water of life do to Jessica? She says. She knows what it'll do. It's like, I'll be visited with all the pain and misery of 1,000 generations of women. So basically, it's going to change me because of all the shit that I'm going to have to experience. All of it will be bad. All of it will be pain. All of it will be misery. So that's what she, lets herself in for. And it changes her markedly. She becomes a fanatic. Because suddenly, everything becomes a small concern that would have once been, things that were once sort of major concerns to her, like the welfare of her children and family, and they become small, and then suddenly she starts to think big because she carries the burden of all this knowledge, and it really be the knowledge of pain and misery. Now, those of us in the world who've endured our fair share of pain and misery, and it hasn't killed us, well, we're kind of that anyway. None of us get out of it. None of us are clean, are we? None of us have led a life free of pain and misery. And it'd be an element of that as to where with pain and misery becomes experience, and then in certain ways it reiterates the Nietzsche thing of whatever doesn't kill us makes us stronger. Which is, again, a fact. You could talk about, like Nicholas Taleb will say that humans are anti-fragile. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's like, we're not fragile, we're anti-fragile. It's like once bitten, twice shy. It's the way that human life always functions, even animal life functions in that way. And it's like, the difference between a human being and an animal is something that's pointed to in Dune with the box test. It's like, will you give in to fear or will you see it through? Are you an animal that can be just frightened by stories and threats and what people might do, or are you a human that would face danger or challenge and hit it head on? It's like, are you a pragmatist or are you a bleeding heart? And it's like, to pass the test, you're a pragmatist, aren't you? That box can't hurt you. This priestess isn't going to murder you. You're a duke. There are repercussions. She'd be dead before she, got out of the room. Even if she is a high-ranking member of the Bene Gesserit. Do you understand that Bene Gesserit is another way of saying Jesuit? And they've implanted all these ancient myths with all these people in order to, in the future, they may or may not need to manipulate them. And the way to manipulate the Fremen would be to produce them a messiah. And the David Lynch thing, that almost casts Muad'Dib as Jesus. And it rains at the end and all that crap. Oh, Where there was hate, more deed would bring love. No, that's not what happens at all. David Lynch didn't have the guts to tell the story. You read the books or you watch the new movie, and Paul claiming the throne and claiming ascendancy to Emperor of the Universe starts a war. In the David Lynch version, everyone just lays down their arms and Al bends the knee to the Kwisatz Haderach. But that is not what happens in Dune. A war starts, and because the war means that basically the Spacing Guild is in trouble because Paul controls Arrakis, so Paul controls the spice, so Paul controls the Spacing Guild. When he is able to disrupt the Spacing Guild, billions of people around the galaxy die of starvation. There's no trade anymore. They die of starvation. Trade comes to an end. So in some regards, it's like the shutting down the Suez Canal. It's like blowing all the cargo ships out of the water. Now what are you going to do? So it's like cutting off the oil. So okay, you've got all these fancy spaceships that can do this trick. You need the spice. Let's think of spice as fuel. You've got no fuel for your ships. Just how useful are your fucking ships now? You've got no fuel. So that's what happens in the story. It's a tragedy. It's the worst thing that could possibly happen. It's a warning. And they use the proper word as well in the film. It was quite funny because, God, my local Odeon cinema, you know, there's like 3 people work there. It's a multiplex with like 8 screens, and there's only 3 people work there. I'm like, this is insane. Nobody works here. It's all just computerized. There's no person. You can go in and buy a ticket off. You just have to press the touch screens and sit. It's like, wow. But the audience, as I look round, it's like there was only about 12 people. Saturday night, this town is dead. Saturday night at 8 o'clock, and I'm watching the hottest new release in the cinemas in a good cinema. There's 2 in Rochdale. I went to the really good one, the Odeon at Sandbrook Park, and there was 15 people watching it or something. And it's like most of them were of Pakistani descent who I was watching it with. Right? And what do the Fremen call the Lisan al-Gib or whatever, the Messiah? They call him the Mahdi. The Mahdi. To a certain degree, Dune draws a lot from Khartoum. If you've ever seen Khartoum, or you know the story of what happened at Khartoum, it draws a lot from Khartoum. The Mahdi. That's the religion in Dune is called their book is not the Holy Bible. It's called the Orange Catholic Bible. And in Frank Herbert's future, Islam, Catholicism, and Protestantism have all become the same religion and have things in common. The Mahdi is a figure from Islam. He's like a warlord. There's a warlord will come one day who will, basically start the caliphate. Yeah? So it's like, in that audience where they're mostly Muslims, or Rochdale Pakistanis, they'd be like, oh, we know this story already. We know this story already. It's like, this is a bit of us, this is about us. And it's like, well, it kind of is. Frank Herbert was some American guy who was alarmed at the way that his uncle had been treated. It was Frank Herbert's uncle. Joseph McCarthy. Joseph McCarthy, yes, that Joseph McCarthy. McCarthyism. Yeah, he was Frank Herbert's uncle. A fine man who was brought down. died young as well. And it's like Frank Herbert's contribution to the world is to say, right, you know, the desperate situations people find themselves in around the world, if they reach for religion, they will always reach for the myth of the Messiah who would come and save them. And when the Messiah arrives, they usually kill him in real life. Someone who's a good candidate would be killed because they know what the cost of it would be. But there are those who would wait their entire lives for the second coming of Jesus, or else the coming of the Mahdi. And it's like, yeah, you just wait for 1,000 years. Don't fuck with the status quo. Don't start a revolution. Don't stand and fight. Wait. Don't do anything. Your reward's waiting for you in heaven. It's like, it is certainly, that is the way that people are enslaved. And that's actually that's a line from the movie. Charney, who's been rewritten to be a skeptic, that's what she's saying. She's like, this is how we're enslaved. She got it. She knew. But she couldn't stop it. Paul didn't want to do it. Didn't want to do it. Why did he do it? Why did he proclaim himself the Mahdi, the Kwisatz Haderach, the Hassan al-Gib, whatever? Why? Because he was forced to do it by the Harkonnen. He had no choice. In the end, the choice was death or be the Mahdi. So in the end, he had to. He didn't want to do it. There's a brilliant little sequence where he's talking to his mother, who's all for, yeah, you've got to do this. You've got to take over these guys. You've got to do this. You've got to proclaim yourself. You've got to get the fundamentals to join, and then we'll have an army of millions. And he's like, I'm not doing it. And she's like, give these people hope. And he shouts in her face, that's not hope. And I'm not doing it, but in my mind I'm like this. Well told. That's not hope. Waiting forever to be saved is not hope. It's enslavement. The Fremen had been enslaved by, they were so desperate and their lives were so hard, they'd been enslaved by a myth that had been foisted upon them by those in the future who might find them a useful asset or piece on a chessboard that they could control. And there were those amongst them who knew, and it happened anyway. So it's like, I don't mind what Denis Villeneuve, director and writer of the new Dune, I don't mind what he's done to it. I think he's done a good job of one of the characters he's altered heavily to make her actually more involved in the story as well, to make it actually a better part. Made it a better part for someone who's a skeptic. No, never. This mustn't happen. But it does. And then Paul, he doesn't want to do it. Because he's had the visions. He knows what it leads to. He's like, no, I'm not going to do it. And then his hand's forced and he does. And what happens? Oh, holy war, jihad. The Fremen are unleashed upon every one of the great houses. And the Fremen are ruthless, murdering psychopaths, fanatics, who see humans who are not them as sources of nourishment. Water. Not so much food, but certainly water. You can't have one without the other, can you? There's a few good lines in it, where it's like Harkonnen troops, when they're harvesting the water from them, and they said, this water's no good, it's full of chemicals. But it's good for running cooling systems, machinery. It's like, this isn't good water. Why? Because these people are unclean. They're all on drugs. It's like, they copped out a bit on Harkonnen society. They, they, they looked at it for a minute, but they didn't do as much as they could. The gladiator fight thing that Fade Rother goes through in the book that didn't appear in the David Lynch movie appears in this one. Where it's like, we don't get to see very much about Fade Rother, but we see just enough. Again, played by, he's in everything, isn't he? That Austin Butler at the moment. He's in that Masters of the Air as well. He's actually particularly good in that. Masters of the Air, by the way, it's not as good as Band of Brothers were, but it's a perfectly decent, enjoyable television series. You see how much time I have on my hands. It's like, what am I currently watching? I'm currently watching Halo, which nobody likes, but I quite enjoy. Halo is pretty good. The Bad Batch has returned. I'm watching that. I've watched the first couple of episodes of Shogun, and that appears to be brilliant. That's really good. What else is on? Yeah, Masters of the Air. So it's you know, I do spend it as you know, as the situation's made it plain that I have to spend most of my time at home. It's like, yeah, I am getting to watch quite a bit of stuff. But it's a matter of I made the trek out last night to go and watch a movie at the cinema. Something I don't do very often. But yeah, I was actually satisfied. As a fan of Dune, who's been a fan of Dune since I was 15, when I first read it. I saw the film, it was out in 84. I saw it when I was about 10, but I couldn't make a great deal of sense of it. But I read the book when I was, say, about 15. And from then had been a fan. I've read all the books of Dune. I actually understand all of it. It's one of them, you read it when you're young and it stays with you, and then you revisit it. And lots of people revisit Dune and will read it again, and they'll read it again and they'll understand more about it because you've got a more mature mind to understand what it's trying to say, or its references are. And yeah, it's one of them. It's like, if you read that book 20 years ago, I would recommend that you pick it up again and read it again, because there'll certainly be something that your young mind missed that's staring you in the fucking face when you're 35. So it's like, for those who are not well acquainted with the material, Dune and Dune 2, the movies that have just been made, they actually do a fair job of telling a story that for years had been thought of as being unfilmable, unmakeable. But CGI nowadays has made it so it's actually possible to give it the scale it needs. You know, you don't need 1,000 extras anymore. You don't need to build great big sets and motion capture models and stuff like that. You don't need to be compositing things. You don't have to. You can have a choice as to what it looks like. There's no need for a dodgy special effects, and there's no need to cut any corners. But the mechanism is used to tell the story is that he's rewritten Chani. So it's like she's a different character. But I think that was the sacrifice to make. And then Thufa Howard playing just absolutely no part in its thing. And Gurney, the reintroduction of Gurney not be the same as it was previously. So it's like, in rewriting, changing the parts of Gurney, Halleck and Chani, it's like he has done a good job of adapting it to the screen, making it so something unmakeable has been made, and it ends up being like 5 hours, like watching a box set, like watching a little mini-series. And I have to say, they've done a good job. There'll be those out there who say, oh, well, they've changed Charlie from the books. That's sacrilege. It's like, how else are you going to tell such a complicated story with so many characters and so many ins and outs? How? It's like, hats off to that guy, he's managed it. The Fremen are the dickheads they ought to be. But it's a matter of, in including a kind of younger skeptic set of Fremen, it's like, oh well, in exposition now, they can lay upon us the ins and outs of what the stakes are, which it does well. It's a big story, Dune, but it's like you can make it a small story if you want to fuck it up. David Lynch failed to make a decent Dune movie. He put in an effort and a lot of money was spent, but it was impossible. And they just did the best, and they were able to create something that acts as almost a companion piece to someone who's read the books. A companion piece. Now there's actually a Dune movie. So it's like, I would expect that there'll be new people come along and read the material, and maybe they'll look at the material in a different light because Denis Villeneuve has given them a keystone. And it's like, you wait forever for the Messiah to come and save you, and you'll die waiting for the Messiah. And in all those years you were waiting, you could have been doing something. Which is, as theology sort of stuff goes, which I do enjoy talking about from time to time, that's the most important lesson I've ever tried to teach anybody about religion. Don't wait to be saved. No one's coming. Don't be tricked. Hope is bullshit, and faith will sometimes see you in the ground before anything ever changes. It's like, destroy the pedestal, take away the position. No Messiah. No Messiah be the thing. To know there is none. There's no one coming to save you. No Messiah. The no Messiah would be a better outcome than the Messiah. Someone to come out and say for definite, look, no one's coming to save you, and for you to understand that would do you more good than a warlord who would get you killed, take you to holy war, and drag you into hell with blood on your hands. I highly recommend, for those who aren't familiar with the material, that's your entry point. Watch the movies. They've done a decent job.